Hi, everyone. My name is Tyler. All right. As you'll see, I'll be using the word manipulation a lot. It's not a word I use lightly, and I don't use it to describe many people, but the patterns and tactics that are employed for emotional and mental manipulation and brainwashing are always the same. Having been a victim of brainwashing in the past and knowing what it feels like when it's happening, I knew what signs to look for. And as painful as those experiences were, they've also become a gift. I ask everyone here, please take the time to study the tactics of brainwashing and emotional manipulation. Our brains are like computers, and they're easily hackable and programmable by people whom I've come to know as mental predators. All right, so what about this online Bible study? How did we finally figure out that someone was trying to crawl inside of our minds and take us for a ride? Well, it wasn't any one thing in particular, but a culmination of things. Monica lists several of those things in her testimony about the ever expanding class schedule, the dress code, the growing list of rituals. It was also being asked to text our small group teacher, Nick, as a part of a homework assignment, something vulnerable and personal about yourself. But when you asked for the same thing from him in return, he gave you nothing. In fact, the same pattern was true with all four of the teachers that we met in person at various different times. They were really hard to get to know on a personal level. And it was also the fact that on at least nine different occasions, questions or objections I had brought up after the class in private discussions with people, whether it was Nick or Francesca or Cynthia, I'd have these private conversations and then they would just end up as talking points magically in the next lesson. We went on to learn about New John, and they claimed in their study that he was the one who overcomes, the only one, just one person rather than anyone who overcomes. But the real kicker was when they told us that Jesus is not God, and that New John claims to be married to the spirit of Jesus. He was a man in his 90s, and that if we gathered at Mount Zion where New John was standing singing the new song, we might not only become one of the 144,000 or the great multitude as mentioned in the book of Revelation, but we ourselves would become married to a spirit that would indwell inside of us. Not Jesus, but one of God's many dead martyrs. Now, if that sounds absolutely crazy to you, good. And if your head is hurting, mind it too. And of course, this sounds crazy when you're hearing it presented in this way. And you might be thinking, who would fall for that? Well, here's the thing: they don't start with crazy, and this is how brainwashing works. They don't start that way, but rather in the beginning, they start with things that are true and unobjectionable. And then slowly over time, over a long period of time, they slowly and gently massage in their thoughts and their beliefs and their ideologies and their terminology into your brain, all while trying to isolate you from things from the outside world so that they can gain more access and control over your time and your attention, and while they're trying to gain a hold over your mind and indoctrinate it with their programming agenda. They would say things also like, leave your churches, don't read commentaries, don't look at biblical historical records, and don't Google anything. After all, there's so much bad information online. But while all of this is going on, for some reason, we're not allowed to know who New John is or where he's located. Not yet. Which is weird to me because, well, why can't we know who New John is? Why is he so separated from us? Why is he less accessible to us than Jesus was at his first coming? So, did I Google and try to find New John? Yeah, I absolutely did. And it took me about 5 days to find him. He's a man in his 90s. Their New John is Man-hee, and he has some nasty things written about him. The headlines are not flattering, but that wasn't the thing that did it for me. After all, news can be wrong, and so can popular opinion. What did it for me was two different things. All right, first of all, I went on YouTube and I found a ton of witnesses who either took the Bible study and left it, like we did, or they took the further step and they joined the Shincheonji church. And in every single one of those testimonies, they described accurately what we had been experiencing. They described the process of brainwashing and what the end results looked like with their church, which was a slow building process leading to an end result of total isolation. They confirmed my own suspicions that every real student in the class had been partnered with a secret member of their church, a secret shopper, as we came to call them, who was posing as a first time student for the purposes of gathering information on us in our private discussions with them. And then they would hand it over to the teachers so the teachers would know how to properly groom us in the classroom setting. Secondly, the second reason follows in three different points. A, Man-hee says that Jesus is not God. But if you turn to John chapter 1, verses 1 through 18, you'll see it makes it abundantly and unquestionably clear that Jesus is God. B, Man-hee is instructing his church members to lie to people who are genuinely seeking God, to deceive them. But the Bible makes it abundantly clear that God does not lie. And he definitely does not lie to people who are genuinely seeking him and seeking closeness with him. And then C, finally, Man-hee claims to be married to the Spirit of Jesus Christ. Well, since A and B are true, C is automatically false. Christ is not in Man-hee, which means he is a false teacher, a false pastor, a false prophet, a false Messiah, and he's an antichrist, and you can't listen to a single thing that he says. You have to throw it all out. And you don't need any headlines that may or may not be true to prove this. You just need your Bible. So if you haven't read your Bible yet from cover to cover, first of all, don't be embarrassed. A lot of Christians haven't, but please, I beg you, please read it. It's not a boring book, and you're going to find things in there that will blow your mind and at the same time change you from the inside out if you let it. If you have read your Bible from cover to cover, but you didn't fully understand everything in there, that's okay too. There's a lot in there to study. Just don't let your questions, don't take your questions for granted. Dig for your answers. You can find them. And the answers are weird and strange and extraordinary. Far stranger than I ever thought that they would be when I began studying. And I finished reading my Bible for the first time while I was in the early stages of that class. And it was a really good thing I did. It was actually a slow-moving process for me, reading through my Bible. It took me about 4 years, actually. And the reason it took so long is because I would stop and I would study the things I didn't understand. The moment I got to something that was a big nagging question. And, I still don't have all of my questions answered yet, but I'm really glad that coming into that experience with that class that I had enough of them answered, because it was knowing my Bible well enough that allowed me to know the difference between God's truth and somebody else's lies. And if I didn't have that, I might still be in the class, or I might have taken the further step of actually joining their church. And I wouldn't have caught the warning signs that I saw going on there. And I would have not known or have the education to know the difference between God's truth and somebody else's lies, false teachings that the Bible definitely warns us about, specifically warns us about teachings that lead to a second death. John 1:18 means a lot to me personally. Quoting from the last part of it, it says, "No one has ever seen God, but the one and only Son, who is himself God." Jesus is God, and don't let anyone tell you any different.